Hello and welcome to the second episode of Let's Talk with One Step Borders. I'm Ellen and today I am joined by Dr Ruaraidh MacKessack-Leitch, who earlier this year was appointed Mental Health Officer for Selkirk Rugby Club. This is a new appointment. The role was created following the untimely and tragic death of one of their young players who sadly lost their life to suicide last year. With Ruaraidh's background as a GP and as somebody who wants to educate people about mental health and all the complexities that come along with trying to communicate about that, he is here to talk to me today about the work he plans to do for Selkirk Rugby Club going forward. And his mission to empower communities to ensure that they have the framework and resources that they need to talk to each other and support each other and themselves. So with that, I am going to go let him in. He's currently in the waiting room. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Just made it back in time.
I'm glad to finally meet you, even though it's over Zoom.
Yes.
So thank you so much for joining me today, Rudy. You've been really enthusiastic about filming this episode with me since I approached. It's very clear how passionate you are about spreading the message and reaching as many people as you can. So I'm just going to jump in and ask you my first question, which is, from your point of view, what do you think the main obstacles that young people face are with regards to their mental health and understanding it and seeking support if they need it?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the time it's recognizing it. So they may not recognize how they're feeling or that what they're feeling is abnormal enough that they should be seeking help. They might be thinking that everyone feels like this, or sometimes that they might be feeling that they are not right, but they don't think anyone cares. And it's recognizing that either that what they are feeling can be helped with and get support, or equally that what's going on does matter to other people, and that there are interested friends, family, professionals, organizations who are there to help them.
Yeah, because I mean, we've spoken quite a bit prior to this about the sort of gaps in the in-between stage. So the services that are available tend to be more sort of school-aged kids, with a focus on sort of lower scale intervention. And then on the other sort of end of the spectrum, you've got CAMs and crisis teams at the hospital. But that space in the middle is crucial to like a person's experience. And out with the third sector at the moment in the borders, there's nothing to sort of cover that middle ground. The vastness of it, like within that space, you've got so many different levels of support that is needed. But essentially what's happening is people aren't qualifying for the adequate support until they reach crisis level. There aren't any, at the moment anyway, there aren't any other third sector organizations that are as established as One Step Borders. They don't have the sort of the skill set and compassion focused therapy that we use. And I mean, we rely on funders and donations. And I mean, that's not entirely secure. So I mean, if that was to be pulled, there'd be literally nothing for young people to access. So is that partly why you've taken on the role of a mental health officer? Like, do you think that some of that vital support can be sort of facilitated through communities like the rugby club?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it can be difficult to navigate support for people because one, they don't know what's out there. Two, it varies a lot by location. And there's different levels of support and different methods of support that work for different people. Not everyone needs the exact same type of support or would find it helpful. So, I mean, one of my key objectives is to raise awareness, start the conversation about mental health within the rugby club and the wider community. Certainly here in Selkirk, the rugby club, it's a big part of the community. And if we can start the conversation here, then my hope is that it will spread. And talking about mental health, recognize mental health problems, people knowing where they can get support, how they can get support, will become a lot easier and just more natural for everyone. And that can only have benefits for not just the rugby club members, but the wider community as well.
So what are your plans for the club, and particularly Selkirk's younger players? Like, what projects do you have coming up that kind of integrates the whole thing?
Yeah, so all a little bit in kind of the kind of planning stage, and a lot of it does depend on what's allowed when. Certainly the kind of projects and things that we've got are going to be, I'm hoping to be able to arrange alongside some of the health, mental health improvement people from the NHS borders, some mental health awareness sessions and suicide prevention training for the club as a whole. I think it will mainly focus on like potentially coaches, management team, potentially some players as well, just to have that kind of training involved. That's something we're hoping to get up and running, but it does require face-to-face training, which can't really happen until we're allowed. One of the things that I think is probably quite key and potentially a kind of important time to be supporting players is on the transition from youth to adult rugby. I certainly remember from my youth days, not many people transitioned up from my youth team into the adult team. There's a variety of reasons for that, and I think it is a different world, school rugby to adult rugby. Different pressures, different sort of expectations, different way of enjoying the game and socializing, which I think can be quite sort of difficult to kind of understand if you've not been in that environment before.
Yeah, quite intimidating if you're not sort of.
Can be, yeah.
No, I can imagine. And I think it is important to kind of engage the more kind of senior players and members of the club as well, not just the people that play the sport, with young people who are going to be coming up. Like, I think it's important that they feel that, you know, going to that community, if you like, is something that's safe and supportive and positive as well. Like, I think a lot of the sort of framework around having these conversations is the sort of assumption that it is going to be so weighted and heavy, whereas I think if you're having like the right kinds of conversations, they could be totally natural, like just between friends, really, and finding a sort of a way of talking about it that is comfortable and useful for everyone. Because I mean, it is hard to talk about for various different reasons, and I think it's almost impossible for some people to have those conversations, whether you're, you know, a little Rhinos player or you're like on the board. I don't know.
Yeah.
We've all been made aware, especially recently, of the kind of irreparable damage that can do to people, to families, to communities. And why do you think it's important that these kinds of discussions are happening in the rugby world? Because rugby is quite a male-dominated arena, and it's quite well known that men do have quite a lot of sort of hesitation and issues when it comes to expressing themselves.
Yeah, so I think that's exactly why it is particularly important. It's a sport that relies on kind of being strong, being dependable, being reliable, and not showing vulnerability. You see it when you're a player. If you can see there's a weakness in the opposition team, that's what you're wanting to exploit. So therefore, in some respects, we're trained not to show weakness. Which is useful from a kind of scoring tries and tackling opponents' point of view. But then actually, if we don't recognize that we ourselves or our teammates aren't firing at 100% because of reasons to do with mood, motivation, stress. And there can sometimes be criticism on poor performance, and people take that quite heavily. And sometimes it's not because they're not trying, or there are other reasons at there, and we need to kind of make sure that people are supported.
Yeah. And have you seen, obviously, like a lot of other Borders clubs have been quite interested in the developments in Selkirk with you and the plans that you've got. Do you feel quite positive that you're sort of going to initiate a change that's hopefully going to be rolled out, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's definitely been a lot of movement in the background from a load of the Borders rugby clubs and from the SRU. The SRU recently released an e-learning module for anyone to access to do with mental health awareness, suicide prevention, and certainly within the Borders, the SRU and the Health Board, Health Improvement Strategy are looking at kind of creating kind of system for the rugby clubs to help support their members in a kind of more integrated way. So there's definitely a lot going on in the background for specifically in the Borders, but also in the wider rugby world in Scotland.
Well, it's really good to see. I feel like that sort of change is kind of what we've been waiting for. But we've also spoken previous to filming how, just because of COVID and everything, your actual job as mental health officer is a bit ambiguous at the moment. Do you have any like targets that you really want to hit, or like messages that you want to implement?
Yeah. So I mean, my two main objectives are, in a broad sense, to increase awareness of mental health and the struggles that can happen, and be there to support those who are having struggles with their mental health, or more importantly, I think, to support people who are concerned about others but don't know what to do about it. People are often very scared that they'll say the wrong thing or make it worse, so they do the worst thing, which is do nothing. And that is kind of one of my key things throughout all the kind of education and awareness that I'm hoping to facilitate at the club, is that anyone in the club it will have some idea of what to do, or at least the confidence to seek some help and support for anyone that they're concerned about, or themselves. Trying to get people to talk about it, I think, is the first thing. The normalization of mental health problems. You talked earlier, we're very good at talking in rugby clubs about our physical injuries. Or I've got a sore knee, I can't run, I need to do rehab, all this kind of stuff. That's really, really normal. So I think if we can normalize that conversation, that sort of weakness, that vulnerability, then we should be able to normalize our stresses, our mood problems, our anxieties. And that should be part of the normal conversation that we have. That should be what we're looking out for with each other. We see someone running on a sore knee and like, just give it a rest, mate. We should be able to say, if someone's not quite firing, we should be able to recognize that and have ourselves have the confidence to do it. And this is what I want to try and get people to do. I'm not sure I know how to do that, but that's kind of my plan. So training, education, talking about it, kind of really emphasizing that it is okay to talk about things, and there are people who want to listen to you, people who want to talk to you about anything and everything at any time. Then that's kind of where I think it needs to go. How exactly I'm going to do that, I'm not sure. If anyone has any ideas, I would love to hear from them, because it's going to take everyone to kind of sort this out. It's not just down to individuals, it's down to everyone.
Well, that kind of moves us on to before we filmed this, we put out the sort of questions that people would have, and one of the questions was sort of framed around, would it be an idea for Ruaraidh to set up a coaches and team managers group to help spot and make themselves available to players, and give them ideas on how to spot signs of mental health challenges for them in themselves and with their peers?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that I'd be hoping to kind of roll out when we are able to do the mental health awareness training and suicide prevention training that I mentioned before. Something that I would hope we would run more than just once, partly does depend on how funding and things go for it. But I believe that they are hosted for free, but need to kind of fully clarify that.
Because it is, I think, a lot of the like you're saying, like it's easy to know what the goals are. It's like putting in between to actually take the steps and achieving them. And I'm saying giving them what they need to actually articulate what it is they're experiencing and what it is they're feeling, I think is a massive part of it. Not everyone's going to have the same way of expressing themselves. So I think giving them a sort of an idea of how to actually start the conversation and have it. Another one of the questions was, would the rugby club consider mentoring through the age groups, like with the Rhinos in the youth club, with some of the first team players, to show that it is good and useful to talk about things and how to support one another?
I mean, I think that sounds like a good idea. I think certainly something like that can be very helpful. You want to see everyone in your club, everyone in your community having the same kind of attitudes, focus, and drive to make these things better. So I don't really have any kind of preference as to who does what when, but as long as we're all singing from the same song sheet. So I think first 15 players, adult players, talking about mental health in a kind of potentially more relatable context to younger members, that could be very helpful. I mean, I think that's definitely something the club could look at and see if we can sort out.
How can we use more senior players and members to demonstrate the importance of understanding and expressing yourself?
I think so. Having players, different members of different parts of the clubs, talking to each other, doing presentations, seeing there are a variety of projects in other rugby clubs that we could potentially steal. Things like mental health contacts, mental health ambassadors, or mental health mates. They're called different things in different clubs. Essentially, where there's a few players or members of the background team who have a sort of very kind of informal role as a kind of mental health advocate. There's lots of different ways of doing it, and we as a club need to work out what's right for us, and that is a conversation that everyone in the club needs to take part of, and then shape what works for Selkirk.
And do you think those conversations are happening, or do you think they're sort of happening but in kind of little cliques?
I think they're definitely happening, but they might be in little silos in different parts of the organisation. We are partly limited in our ability to meet up and talk about things.
I think with something as subject as mental health, like you kind of need that human interaction part of it for it to be effective. Hopefully, with Selkirk being quite a small community and the rugby club being a big part of that community, I do hope that like it does sort of set a momentum, and then we can get a kind of push across the town as well. Well, yeah, I feel like I kind of asked everything that I was looking to ask. So I guess in terms of wrapping it up, as a mental health officer, do you have a kind of parting message that you would like to share, or something that you just like to hammer home, or anything like that?
Yeah, and I think it's essentially when it comes to mental health and how you're feeling, the important thing is often people feel quite isolated with it. They feel alone. It feels as though no one really cares or no one wants to talk to them. The thing that I tell people all the time is there is always someone who wants to hear what you're feeling, what you're thinking. There is always someone who is interested in what's going on in your life. And that may not be apparent to you, but there always is someone. And that can take the shape of anybody, family members, friends. If you're at school, it can be teachers, health professionals like myself. Even if it's like silly o'clock in the morning, 4 in the morning, you can contact places like Breathing Space, Samaritans. There are a variety of text services if you don't want to talk to someone by voice. So that's my passing message: is there's always someone there who's really eager to hear what you've got to say, no matter if you don't think there is.
Lovely.
Thank you. It's been a very good talk, and I look forward to kind of seeing how this project runs and what support we can get and what help and overall improvement we can have in Selkirk, in the rugby club and the community in general.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Happy lunch.
Yeah, I've got it right here. Yeah. Thank you. It's been good. All right.
Bye.
Go ahead.
So that's it for episode 2 of Let's Talk. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you also to Rudy for lending us your time. We really appreciate it. I hope this episode has given you an idea of what Rory is looking to do in his role as mental health officer. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the progress that they make and hopefully inspire strides across the borders in terms of bettering our mental health and well-being and access to the support for our young people. But yeah, that's it from me. Thank you again, and I shall see you next time. Bye.